Welcome to my talk on SOAR response plans. My name is Rob Gresham, and I've been doing SOC operations for about 20 years now. I was one of the original Phantom folks coming over from the acquisition, and while I like building playbooks and response plans and helping customers use our SOAR products, currently I'm the global security practice automation architect for professional services. I help other consultants make sure that they have the capabilities and also help standardize the processes and practices for the teams to deliver to our customers. Now, back when I was a kid, we played this game called Mortal Kombat, and now it's 29 years old. So I figured I just finished watching the movie, so I will try not to let you have any spoilers, but watching the movie and seeing through the characters develop over time, SOAR is kind of like this in a way where we kind of have to develop our characters over time and how we develop our capabilities over time. The key here is each time we fight a battle, we learn more about how our adversary fights and how to defend against it. And over time, I'm going to use this theme to show us how we can keep using SOAR to help combat certain things and look at different problems. Really, we want to focus on your training, and that's just like Mortal Kombat. You want to work your way through all the training that you have, but ultimately you want to win. You want to win the end game, and that's what I want to help you do. So the first thing is understanding your soul. No, not like Shang Tsung here who wants your soul, but more about how you're training and understanding your security operations event lifecycle. Your security operations event lifecycle is really wrapped around traditional security operations areas, just like katas. These are things that we do all the time, every time. And pretty much we do them in different ways, but they're generally the same thing. Ingestion, some event, alert on that event, turn around and do some kind of external validation of what the original alert told us, scoping and internal hunting, monitoring or changing things. Sometimes we want to monitor and we don't act on it. Sometimes we're going to act and make a change. Sometimes we're running particular jobs to actually execute either a detonation or some kind of sandboxing process. And then lastly, notifications. We need to be able to document and notify leadership, peers, and our team on the things that are happening within events going on around our organization. So one of the things that really impact us severely is really the idea of ingest, external context, internal contents, and then being able to respond effectively. And if you have to monitor something to see if it's for sure, or you have to run a job, then you have to go back and add additional processes to this. And the longer it takes to do this, it's more impact and more money. So sometimes you need to change the way things happen. The idea is to work through these pieces. And in order to gain speed through this, you have to use SOAR. And that's one of the main reasons why people like using SOAR. So you have different types of response capabilities inside the SOAR products. Most of the time you have some kind of playbook, and then maybe you have some kind of workbook or plan process. Now, I'll give you a demo on stuff later today, but mostly I want you to wrap yourself around that we have two different capabilities, and these two different capabilities generally don't work well together. That might be a spoiler alert, something about Sub-Zero and Scorpion. So when we talk about how we want these two pieces, SOAR is really about human-machine teaming, in my opinion. Yes, the machine can do a lot of things for you. It's analytically consistent. It's significantly faster, but also you need to know everything you need to do across that process, and you need to be able to make decisions, right? But then, as we all know, there are certain things about incidents and response that are more visual, more instinctive, more understanding and capabilities and things that you learn through experience. While your human capability isn't efficient, it's highly effective most of the time, right? Most of the time. But it is prone to cognitive bias. And just understand that what we want to do is kind of combine the best of both worlds in this process, right? And when we look at playbooks and workbooks, they have two different things, right? Playbooks are really a rigid set of actions or interactions. It's one flow, one way, one process, right? When you try to win with SOAR with only a series of one plays, it's monolithic, inflexible, and difficult to maintain. Think of 674 different detection capabilities and having to write a playbook for each one. However, when you start to use workbooks or look at it from a workbook perspective, you can have specific actions, specific decisions, and interactions correlated by response tasks. It breaks up the automation into reusable parts and reusable tasks. It's faster development, it's flexible, more maintainable, more adaptable because you can plug and play with different response tasks over time. So really, your team has to decide which one is best for your team, whether it's playbooks or workbooks. But either way, both of these things can provide your response plans. Headless operations really is about not interacting with the product and being able to move automation tasks like enrichment, move it from one point to another point, enrich it en route, or add additional context en route, and then leave that process up to the other system. Case management operations is unlike ticketing. It's more about centralizing around the analyst and speeding up what the analyst does by repeating and making those tasks consistent. Like we can do enrichment in a headless operation consistently over and over, but we don't manage how the tasks are being performed when we're doing headless operations for the most part, because we don't want the analyst to interact with the SOAR product. But in case management, we want the analyst to interact with it on a regular basis. So how do we manage all these particular things that we have coming into Phantom or any SOAR product that you have across the board? The reality is that, like I said before, 674 objects actually create an enormous amount of things and entry coming in. And essentially, you need some way to combat that tool and enter MITRE Combat, right? I'm making a natural play on the Mortal Kombat theme, but the idea is that MITRE is a helpful piece and a hurtful piece in the same realm. Allows us to make more detections, but if we follow the technique model, we'll make a lot of different playbooks handling each different technique. What we really want to do is step it up a level. We want to come up to the tactics and build response plans that are based on the tactic and do your analysis based on the tactic. So if you take that detection and you do some analysis related to that tactic, like for example, you take PowerShell execution, Windows scripting hosts, and command execution, and you say that's an execution detection, right? And you categorize that as what are the assets that are being affected? Execution, some process, right, on a host, and credentials are being used. So of those three things, you can monitor those processes, and you know that you can have an investigate execution workbook, and you can have an investigate response or a response workstation workbook and tie all these pieces together so that you can do an effective response plan. And you can change this for every kind of tactic. Now, each tactic has different capabilities. Some things are easier to investigate, but I've originally, in the package that I gave you, I started out with two of them that you'll be able to use. One is execution and the other is command and control. When you look at this, how workbooks and playbooks work together in this is that you would have different types of alerts. You would map them to your Phantom system by MITRE tactic, and then you would have a workbook that fires that has specific tasks for that tactic. And the analyst would interact with the playbooks and the workbooks within that task. Really, this is kind of like splunking through the IR lifecycle, because really we're taking the same things, detection logic, we're feeding them into correlation searches. Those correlation searches are launching an ingest playbook that may do certain things right out of the gate. It may create a ServiceNow ticket. It may close and assign notables. It could, go back and grab more information about other notables that are fired. Then it assigns it to an investigation workbook and then a response workbook if necessary after a determination is made. And then if the determination maybe is false positive, maybe we need to fire a lessons learned playbook and pull that across. Now, this is a very fast way through this. I'm going to break it down in little pieces and show you this going forward. So as we break out the detection logic, you can see that's in your preparation detection. You just get a new detection, you get, the folks from Splunk Security Research, they drop a new detection, you drop that in there, they give you the MITRE tactic and attack framework to tie that together for yourself. So you create your searches, you tag it with the attacks, and now you need to see how it maps to the rest of your correlation searches, right? So you can see here, if you're building your own searches or you're using the default ones, what you're looking for is you're looking for those correlation map services on the tactic side, whether it's initial access or it's persistence or execution or exfiltration. You want to be able to tie these things together because that's how you're going to tie them to your individual ingest playbooks. And as you're doing your incident reviews, naturally you can still do your incident reviews in Splunk ES if you like. Otherwise, you can review all the events, but as you can see here, just on this last 12 hours, they had 23 criticals, 161 highs, 41 or 44 mediums and lows and infos. Do you want to review each one of those, or would you much rather just throw the criticals and over and look at the criticals and maybe they're related to a high too, and now you could see some kind of correlation between them? Like you see here, this particular one, you're just seeing a bunch of them together, but you don't know how they're related to other objects in the queue. So that's where Phantom comes in. We can have an ingest playbook, feed in that process, grab the notable, close the first notable as we're pulling it in so that we can identify that notable, but then also correlate it and pull additional notables in. Also, if we were using some kind of ticketing tool, we can go ahead and create the default ticket process for opening tickets right out of the gate. That's going to save us a whole lot of time going in. And we have all the content to be able to send all this information out, tell everybody what's happened through the process, right? And we can update information based on coming from the ticket and update the ticket ID to the investigation on the backside. So we don't have to be replicating data back and forth. We've marked everything as we need it and as we're working it through the process. And as we align our investigation workbooks, the workbooks are being assigned through each investigation. You can see in the timeline in the SOAR products where these pieces are and how they play out. So as we've added our investigation workbook, there's a list of tasks required for that investigation. It standardizes the task. And then there's a determination. Do we need to continue with containment, eradication, and recovery, or do we need to resolve the investigation as a false positive and send it back, right? So either way, we have these workbook tasks that we can run where we're gathering correlated information and we can add our notes in, or maybe we have a playbook that does that, like obtaining PCAP information. That could be a playbook that just goes out to Moloch and grabs the information and pulls it back. Or we have templated notes where we have to fill specific information in, like you saw in the other piece where all that information was already pre-built and filled in. Well, that's what the investigation details here. Before the ticket gets updated, right, we're going to go ahead and add the summary that needs to be here based on a template, and then add the information in as it comes in from the process. So when we finish up and we close up our response processes, whether we're going to respond or do a containment, we're going to block network addresses, or we're going to quarantine a system, we'll pull those pieces in and tie them all together. So as we're initiating these processes, right, you want to update the ServiceNow ticket with the latest notes. You have the notes, you run the task, and it updates for you. You're not logging into ServiceNow and cutting and pasting and putting this information in. You've put it in your note template, you just push it, and it goes and updates the ticket accordingly, right? As you can see here. And then you can add an additional responsible workbook by just either clicking add, or we could even have a playbook that says when you update the ServiceNow, it prompts the process. What we want to do is be able to automate these processes as much as possible so that the analyst is working through their pieces as they can. And then lastly, we have that lessons learned process of picking up the last task of maybe we need to fire a ticket back to the detection team and say, hey, this is a really noisy alert. Maybe you might want to tune it a little bit better. And give them the feedback they need that why this was a false positive from that perspective, right? And we take that information, we tie it back, right? And we could use notes and free form it and help that analyst walk through that process. Now, I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this SOAR response plan demo. But first, I wanted to cover a couple of things. And by the way, this is Johnny Cage. He isn't really in the movie, but I figured I'd pull him in here for the demo because he's always the showman and wants to show you what's going on in the world. Now you can see workbook automation. And as we look through the workbook automation, this is the ingest and enrichment. This is the automation process that happens before you even get to the workbook. Whether it's a host alert or network, there's a parent process called the event ingest processing, and it's the one that's going to attach the appropriate workbook on its way in based on the tags and the playbook definition. And then there's going to be indicator analysis playbook that actually helps with the other indicator process, and we'll cover this one a little bit in the demo. But as you can see across the bottom, it does the IP, domain, URL, file hash, and user host enrichment right out of the gate, just to save you time to go through that process. Then you have the workbook playbooks, right? Here's where you can see the alignment across the process when you start looking at workbooks. Like process, if you're looking at the vertical lines of the playbooks, you can see that process, new event, is the same for all three, right? You can see that process host validation is the same. You can see process indicators is the same. So as you start to work these tasks and figure out what tasks you need, you can figure out what tasks need to be special and what tasks can be used across, like hunting compromised hosts. How do you determine the scope and breadth of it? You can run a hunting playbook that basically goes back and searches back, tries to find the indicators, and then you can reuse your response workbook for blocking things or your lessons learned in the same task. And this minimizes a lot of your rework because it's standardizing your tasks and what you do versus trying to standardize your use cases, which some people do when they run in headless operations. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the demo now. In this short little video, I won't have the time to go through every feature. However, I just wanted to highlight some of the key components that you guys would enjoy and understand from the execution of this particular process and the technical aspects of it. So just to give you an overview quickly, there are initial automation playbooks that I talked about, 10 of them to be exact, that start the process. This is a middle one that drives towards automatic object enrichment, where you can see here process information and network information, also domain URL, file hash, host analysis, and IP playbooks and setting up the containers for all the stuff that's coming into it, and then try to do as much automation on the front end for customers. Then as we go ahead and move right straight to an investigation, you can see here we're at ESCU malicious PowerShell process. We're going to go ahead and switch to the summary view from this perspective. We can see the timeline here, and this is really where we want the analyst to be able to work from, and I'll demonstrate how the analyst will work from this. So if we click from the workbook side of it, you can see the identification, containment, eradication, and lesson learns phase and the tasks associated to them. But as you scroll down, you will also see some tasks already been completed. Some of these playbooks have already ran for demo purposes, just to make sure they're working correctly. Also, I wanted to demonstrate the fact that they're checked, and you can see which ones are checks are executed through this, so the analyst knows quickly what they need to do or what to process from that perspective. So like the accept sign event one from from Derek's, you can go ahead and see this one, and you can go ahead and process this here. However, all you have to do in order to run this is you just process new event, and you can see here the playbook starts and executes, and then goes ahead and marks the task complete as it finishes and assigns it to me. And you can see that the owner was assigned, the status is open, and the task has been assigned to me, and the task has been completed. And then if we want to go ahead and keep moving on, additional playbooks like validate customer endpoint information, basically go collect all the endpoint information that you can and customer information, so if you have to do any other follow-on tasks, you can do so. In addition, this includes an indicator analysis for host and account that will actually reach out to LDAP and go grab the LDAP information. Unfortunately, for the demo stuff that I had, I don't have an LDAP account associated to Fractal user, some of the ES content coming back, so those executions while they ran and returned to null. Associate host events is one that runs after you run process, and then there's an additional playbook that you can run to run analyze host activity. The content that these create, you can see here. Under enumerate logged in users, this is actually showing you the enumerated logged in users that we have a record for, be stoli of, inside this platform. And this gives us the SPL query, but also the number of times that Fractal user is logged on. And then as we move down, there's something interesting around that. That's a lot of times to log in over this particular period. But if we also look and can look a little bit more and we dig into the user analysis, we can see that Fractal user has logged in 333 times on B Stol system, but 2 times on A Turing's. Well, that's interesting. And when did A Turing's? A Turing's occurred before B Stoli logged in onto his. So those are some interesting points there that we can just keep in mind. And again, we have the SPLs at each one of these notes that we've created. If we go down and we want to see what notables were associated to that host with the same SPL process, we just click more, and we can see that the suspicious Windows event utility was fired. We can see 2 malicious PowerShell processes ran. We can see local admin accounts was fired, and then 2 risk notables. And if we go down a little bit further, we can see the same events under the user analysis. And maybe sometimes we'd have the same ones or different ones, but also notice that this is a critical event and we pulled in all the medium and lows. We can build additional content in the future that we can just go ahead and close these and associate them to this phantom case. And that way we're doing a one-to-many scenario where we're pulling in a critical and closing a bunch of notables that are on the bottom side. Now we do this gracefully inside ES when we're using RBA, but this would be a very easy way to get this to a customer without them going through the RBA process. And then, as I explained before, the LDAP information, if I wanted to collect that from a host, you can see that here. Naturally, the transport endpoint is not connected, so you would not see information. But if I had an LDAP, you would get all the business information you needed, along with some additional primary group and object SIDs if you needed to do additional work for that, and any distinguished names or what groups they were a member of. So as we've reviewed this information, we're going to go ahead and execute the task closure playbook, which is the process customer host and validation. And as we run that playbook will execute, and most likely we will get a prompt after that, and we'll look at that prompt. But we'll go ahead and continue here. We see a task that was assigned to us. We'll look at the indicator analysis and move on to our next task. And oops, I see that prompt is available for us. And you can see here that task has been assigned, and then I have no other things left over. So, and as we move back, you can see that the task has been completed for me, and I can move on to indicator analysis. If there were additional host events there, the associate host events and accounts process would have popped a prompt and told me, hey, by the way, there are other events inside the system for that you could create a case or merge that event with. I dropped some indicators in here so I could demonstrate the indicator analysis, even though this particular event in ES didn't have a lot of them, but I just wanted to demonstrate the capability of this particular integration. So you can see the analysis of indicator. The indicator itself was a URL, and its threat is medium and the confidence is low. Threat and confidence being a threat intel parameters, and you can see that recorded future doesn't have any information regarding this. And then Falcon Sandbox has never detonated it before. But then if I go down to virus total, you can see that this shows up as a malicious site, a malware site, and a malware site. And depending if you trust ESET or Fortinet or Sophos, you might have a good opportunity to convict this a little bit more, hence the rating for medium, but confidence level is low because of the 3 sources, I only have 1 source that's reporting it. And if we go and look at the URL indicator, we have the same process here. And we can go through that and review the exact same setup that we have here, where we have malware and malicious sites. And again, on this one, we would go ahead and process the indicators piece, and this would go through and prompt the analyst for any modifications to the threat intel and then label the content. However, we don't have time for that demo today, but I can be more than happy to show you how that works a little bit deeper. What I wanted to do is go a little bit deeper into the process analysis piece and go from here. If we look at process analysis and we look at the process that was returned, this get process information is one of the execution pieces. And you can see here that we have the process information with parent process name. And at first, this isn't really remarkable information, except for as you start to analyze it in small bites, it starts to add up. First thing you want to be looking for is what things really stand out. And as you can see down here, having a parent process as unknown will generally stand out to you. Also, if you know the host name is bstol, and then you start looking at the users and you know you're using like Azure AD, and you start seeing bstol and Fractal user probably isn't the right user account to be had. So we I am not aware of this environment, but looking at it, I could pretty much assure myself that this isn't supposed to be here, and they're probably not supposed to be a local user be running 32. But the potential there is it could be an admin running some tasks on his system, so I want to be cautious before I immediately convict it. But I can see that it's been done twice, and this may be just because the two names that were provided, it returned the results twice inside the query, and you can see that inside here, where you have two versions of the tstats request pushed out because I had two artifacts coming into this object. If we look down and we look at the parent process information and additional process calls, we'll look at the parent process and what it called. And as you can see here, the parent process name with unknown has called a bunch of other additional things that we can see. And an unknown process calling SC could generally be considered malicious or bad because that's changing the parameters and possibly evasion techniques, changing the parameters of permission of a file or process inside the system. And then additionally, we see that this is all running out of system 32. Well, system, if it's running out of or executing out of system 32, that means the user might have admin credential access, and that's a potential problem. And then as we move down lower, we can also see that bstol Fractal user is called command and called a bunch of utilities. Of particular interest, they called the Windows event utility and also the file system utility that you can see here, along with other pieces that we can see here that may potentially be other issues that look like reconnaissance on the platform. If we scroll down a little bit further and we look down at what the parent process is actually called and we marry those up together with our timestamps, we can start to see command, net, executable, reg server. We can see other pieces being called. And then as we keep scrolling down, we can actually see where we're deleting the fsutil is deleting the journal and the Windows event is clearing the system. Those two commands right there would immediately make me very suspicious of either malicious admin activity or insider threat or possibly issues with malware running on the system. And naturally, you can see down below all the PowerShell commands. The next phase of this particular project would be able to automatically either pull these out and process them correctly, and so that we can see these in plain text, but also to allow maybe the customer wanted to set that up and follow Ryan Kovar's document from 2017 to just go ahead and set that up and decrypt it on Splunk on its way here. I left it open to leave it open for interpretation, but that we can add that piece on later. So I'm pretty much at the end of my time in order to present to you. So what I wanted to do is just make sure that you saw the content, you saw a basis of it, and that you can see how quickly and how fast the value can be attained through this process. Now that you've seen the demo and you kind of see, well, I just want to kind of wrap this up with a quick observation of how do you mature security operations, right? Process improvement and seeing the value of SOAR can be difficult at times. And as you can see, we have Raiden here, who's the god of thunder, and he's going to give us a hand with understanding what we need to do. So one thing that I'd like to use is this operational fractal that me and a couple of peers worked on back in the day. And it's more about people, process, and technology. And importantly, it's in that order: people, the process, and the technology. You can't put technology in front of process and you can't put process in front of people, because if you don't have the people, then you can't have the process. And if you don't have the people, you can't have the process that feeds the technology. So really think about those processes. If you don't have enough people, then you're going to minimize your process and just focus in on the technology and capabilities you have. So the first thing you have to understand is discover. Understand what you're dealing with and how many people you have to accomplish a task. Scope that capability. Decide what you're going to monitor. Alert on the things that you're going to monitor and define what you're going to respond to. As you're responding, realize what things need to be sped up and automate those things. And as you automate those things, be able to share and measure them. Because if you can share and measure them, you'll be able to learn. And as you're able to learn, you'll be able to transform. And looking at that transformation is how can you improve? Because if you measure and transform, then you're going to have change. You're going to be able to add more capabilities or discover more capabilities to put out there for everybody to help you with. Now, this is just a fractal, and the reason we called it a fractal is because it doesn't matter where you are in the organization. If you're the CISO or you're the analyst on the ground, if you look at every problem from this lens of discover, monitor, respond, automate, measure, and transform, and those transitional pieces in between, you'll be able to ensure that you're covering every capability. A lot of times we'll get to automate or we'll get to respond and we won't think about measuring. So, and we need measuring not only to help us transform, but also to market what we do well. Because a sock that is silent, is it really doing good if it's silent? Well, you don't know. And that's the thing. So you have to be able to measure those things that you see. And that's really where we come back into the next thing. Understanding the metrics that you need to present if you're doing SOAR. And this is one way that it will help you be able to present to your team why this SOAR product is going to be valuable to you and how you can gain that value. So the first thing to kind of get your head wrapped around is what's the mean build time? How many things that you need to do in order to get what you need to start to see some value. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a particular customer that you can see the numbers across the bottom, right? It took us 20 days to build 4 integrations and 9 playbooks to cover their automation tasks. Now, these automation tasks were feeding into their playbooks and were enrichment capabilities. Now, we looked at it not as individual use cases, but what were those use cases trying to accomplish and how do we automate all those tasks in the least amount of playbooks and integrations? It took us 3 months to build the 9 playbooks, and we processed about 585 events a day from those 9 playbooks. When you look at the human and technology cost, the license was almost $850,000, and then the support and maintenance for that was $7,000, a little over $7,000. And when we look at when they implemented their capabilities the first time, they found that they had a break-even point around February 23, 2019, about 8 months into their project. And they started to gain on their ROI, right? They basically at 612, they paid for the license and then they started paying for the rest of the PS and everything else that was taken in, all the human costs that was taken in to drive that process. The other thing that you need to be able to measure is you need to be able to measure some common capabilities inside the SOAR capability. One of those is the time to alert the analyst or the time to detect. Now, some people say the time to detect is when the machine detected it, but I'll ask you this. If a tree falls in the woods, did the tree fall in the woods? When did you detect it? When the tree fell or when you observed the tree falling, right? And that's really the key, is understanding that you really won't know the tree fell until you've observed it. So that really means that time to detect is really when the analyst sees the alert in the system and starts the response process. So the minute they accept it, that's time to detect. The mean time to respond is when either they move it new to open, or maybe they move to containment, or they start doing analysis. Mean time to respond means that the analyst is on top of it. They've opened it, they've moved it, right? So from mean time to new event or alert, the analyst sees that alert. Mean time to open, the analyst can actually start working that alert. Sometimes detect and respond will be quick, right? From that perspective. Mean time to contain, right? Mean time contain, really, how long does it take to contain that task? And some people use mean time to respond and swap that for mean time to contain and completely pick up the analyst response time of how long it takes them to pick up the ticket. And it, everybody has their techniques. These are just an example of which ones you can use at this time, right? We have mean time to recovery. How long does it take to get the system re-imaged and back in working order again, right? Because that's how much you're impacting or who you're impacting with customers. And then you have mean time to close. How long does it take you to close the request and return the ticket, closing dispositions that the ticket is closed, and you have a full investigation lifecycle through this process. Now, naturally, mean time to eradicate could be in here, but a lot of times eradication is more inclusive inside of recovery, because 80% of the customers that I've learned they mostly do re-imaging from that perspective. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this talk. You can reach me as Sojakalize at, and yes, that's Sojak, so Sokol, Thank you. You can find me at Psychologize at either GitHub or Twitter, and then on the Splunk user groups inside Slack channels. You can email me at rgresham@splunk.com, and you can chat with me at the B-Sides 2021 place. The playbooks that you found that you saw in the demo are located at the link below, and you're more than welcome to download them and play with them on your own. If you want some help with them, because they can be a little bit more complicated, please ping me. If they're missing some components, please ping me and I'll help you with them, and we'll set up a call and we'll walk through them pretty quickly. Other than that, I hope you have a great day, and I will hopefully hear from you soon. Take care and have a great day.